my friends, for another highly informative and always exciting segment of What's Brewing in the Biosphere. Do you know what's brewing in the biosphere? Hello, Brooke. Hello, Colin. Let's make sure the mics are on.
Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning, Cameron.
I did it.
You did
after
it.
all these years. So what do you think of the new space?
It's beautiful. It's exciting. I walked in. I said, whoa, this has changed. I see a bunch of synths and recording gear. It's amazing space.
We're ready for music. We're doing lessons. We're doing all kinds of stuff.
Seems really like a really cool community space you've created here, Cameron. It feels really great being in here and, glad to see some live music on Friday, driving home from the mountain. It was pretty awesome.
Jesse Roper.
So cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was so good.
Yeah.
And Grace, I don't know if you caught Grace in the beginning, but Grace is
I got a little bit of Grace.
You should hear. So we did a lot of work on the sound and live, but it sounded great through the radio, and we recorded it, and I'm very proud of it. It's our first, so we'll learn every time.
Yeah, where can I check out the video for that?
You can go to the Tuff City Radio Facebook page, and it's all there. We're gonna take it and sync the sound and put up little bits, and but thank you. We're working on it, and as always, what's brewing in the biosphere? You are working on a ton of stuff.
Yeah, maybe we can make a musical update for you.
Just kidding. I forgot to mention Colin Robinson. You're the program coordinator for the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust. Program all the programs?
Just a few.
Okay.
We're a team. We got a couple program coordinators.
Right. And Brooke, you're here. I'm happy to see you.
Yeah, I'm a surprise special guest.
Surprise special guest.
Yeah, I'm the director of community initiatives at the CBT.
Okay.
Yeah, so I also do some programs as part of an amazing team.
Right. There's a lot going on. Can we? Where do you want to start?
I mean, it's granting season. I
Granting
think it's
season.
A great time to talk about money for cool community projects.
Okay. We talk about this a lot, and I love it. What is available to someone who's listening right now to accomplish a goal that they have or live a dream?
Yeah, right now. I mean, the thing about CBT grants is they're very all-encompassing. The focus is research and environment. The focus is healthy communities and culture, language, learning. So pretty much if you have an idea, there's probably a CBT grant that would be able to support it. It's just putting the pieces together and making it work. And our team is super happy to meet and chat and figure out, if and how this can work out.
Let's narrow it down a little bit. I mean, it isn't that narrow. If you have an imagination and you want to do something like a course on crystals, a course on how to hike properly, how to survive outside, maybe the new Chalmers language.
Yeah.
Are there any limits?
The limits, I would say, is it going to make the community a healthier and more inclusive place to be? That's sort of at the end of the day, working to build a healthier ecosystem and community here.
Do you have a couple examples of some past ones that you might share? I know that people have in the past done block parties. I brought up the crystal one because my friend Luisha did a very specific crystals for kids on the beach, and people loved it.
Yeah. So kind of leaning into the Neighborhood Small Grant Program, which is opening on March 15th. So that one, you can start getting your idea brewing now. That is small grants of $50 to $500 for individuals. And what's pretty cool is this is our 10th year at the CBT of doing Neighborhood Small Grants.
Right.
And we've done over 200, or we haven't done it.
Yeah.
The community has done over 200 projects in the region. It's so cool. And that one really... There's no limits, Cameron. Like, what do you want to do this? The check will be written to Cameron Dennison or, Colin Robinson. And you go. And what's really neat is as you say, okay, give us an example. So I'm going to give you an example of Sully. Sully is on a few of the committees and an amazing volunteer for the CBT, but started with a neighborhood small grant as a young member of the community that felt there was no queer supports. And that has now since developed into the Coastal Queers. And what's really neat is now Coastal Queers is applying for our larger grants, which are open right now, and those are our community grants. And they've done several and really great projects that have really shaped the business community, the creating a more inclusive community, and really taught us all a lot in the region about how to be better supporters.
What's the difference between the size of the grants, say? So there's the small grants, and let's talk about the different
these
levels.
are great questions. So typically small grants can be for individuals, and the community grants over the years had been for registered charities. And the CRA recently expanded those guidelines. And if it is within the charitable mandate of the CBT, we could consider with due diligence an individual, but generally these grants would be for societies, nations, governments, and charities still. So those ones are $6,000. And then we go one step up to our Vital Grant, which is like a partnership grant that's going to tackle like a community issue that you're going to work together on. And these are Vital Grants, $20,000.
Like, give me an example of a community issue I might like to tackle.
Ooh, let's throw this one to Colin.
All right. Let's think about a Vital Grant. So generally, partnerships are pretty hard to achieve. We all are neighbors. We're all friends. But for some reason, collaboration takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and nobody seems to have the time and nobody seems to have the money, especially in the sort of not-for-profit community service sector. So we heard a pretty loud and clear need from West Coast Community Resources Society to improve our capacity to have sort of critical incident response, because we were having all these different service providers and people just getting thrown into these extremely, complicated crises that are happening without the proper supports, without the proper like relationships built between agencies and communities. So they applied for a really cool Vital Grant to basically just give them some money and some time to put together a more cohesive critical incident response plan, so that when we have a major sort of traumatic incident, or it could be a range of different things, that we're better equipped to actually respond to it, and in a way that is going to take care of the people responding to it as well as the people who are receiving the care. And that's been an amazing success so far.
Please remind me, I'm so sorry, who got that grant?
That was the West Coast Community Resources Society.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then who do they work with? Who are they doing that in conjunction with? You, with the Biosphere, or with local service providers, like say the fire department or
Fire department, RCMP, and they actually did 2 trainings with volunteers, because it's called critical incident stress management. And what we've learned over the years, post the Leviathan tragedy and some other major events, is often it's community that's supporting you in this. So there was 20 community members that also took part and are part of a volunteer team, and from all the communities. So a Howsett took part, as well as Clayoquot, Ucluelet, and so there's members. And so what kind of was created and what we've learned is sometimes if the tragedy is in Tofino, it might be too hard to support Tofino. So a team from maybe Ucluelet and a Howsett will come, or Tofino may go to a Howsett to support, because everyone may know each other and be involved. And so that was another aspect. And it was our first 2-year Vital Grant. So they got $20,000 in the first year and $20,000 in the second.
Oh wow! And did they apply for that? Did they have to apply again,
No.
or that was the first? Okay,
The biggest grant we'd ever done, and they were the first receiver. Pretty cool.
that's wonderful
Yeah. So this year,
and a good example.
Yeah. This year there's going to be another, I think we've budgeted to have at least one multi-year Vital Grant. Actually, I shouldn't say at least. One multi-year Vital Grant. But, just noting that these projects do take time to build and that they do require, and we often see this too, like many organizations will come back and say, hey, can I just apply for the same project last year?
Right.
And it's definitely important to keep investing in these projects. And so if you've got a project that you've already been working on, come talk to us and we can figure out the best play. And ultimately our goal is to make it as easy as possible to apply. We're here in the community. We're here to help. For other grants, we'll offer to do sort of interview style applications if that works. Like, you don't have to move into our clunky grant application system if you don't want to. We're here to reduce the friction so you can focus on doing your work and not our sort of administrative burdens.
That's actually a big deal. And right now, someone's listening and they're feeling like, I have an idea to do a cooking class for 8 to 12-year-olds. How can they make this happen for themselves? So they just come down to the office and visit you and say hi to Colin?
That one would likely be me. Yeah.
Okay.
So come visit Brooke if you have these sort of smaller scales. So, part of the programs that fall under me would be I run the community development grants. And so that's sort of what I'm leaning towards with that one. Wellness, inclusion, sustainable groups, something, that's come up in community development too, social enterprise, and interesting models such as that. So yeah, keep the ideas flowing, and I can help you with that. And then Jason Sam is another amazing program coordinator. He's going to help you with arts and culture, as well as youth and education. And Colin is the lead on
research and environment.
Nice.
And then a bigger version of that, which is called the Biosphere Research Award.
Yeah.
So again, sort of an environment and research oriented funding goal, but bigger. So the Biosphere Research Award is actually 20 grand. So yeah, and ultimately, if you need to reach out, you can drop by the office. You can write to info@clayoquotbiosphere.org, or just Google us. Find us on Facebook. You know, there's lots of different ways, and one of the staff will make sure we get back to you and connect you to the right person.
I think it's great. And you've been very successful. And I always like when we get to come on and talk about the fun things that people have done, and the very, there's some stuff I have in my head too. So, but we'll get there. What about language programs?
So the CBT, working together with the Coastal Family Resource Coalition the last few years, has been coordinating the Nuu-chah-nulth language program. And these are $2,000 grants for individuals, which is neat. That's the first time we've ever done that big of a grant to an individual. And I really want to thank our community partner on that, which is West Coast Community Resources Society. So we work hand in hand with them, granting the money out. And so we've now done 10 grants to individuals. And so we're just coming up to open that cycle again. And it was all really, really led by community with amazing language and knowledge holders. Simca Martin was very, very huge in the implementing that and getting that, as well as Chuchka, Gail Johnston, Bernice Tucci, Arlene Paul, many, and they're still on the committee that make the decisions on who gets the grant. And great criteria, check it out online, very specific, because there's a lot of passion and pride in language revitalization in the region, and some really great projects. So that is opening until April 30th. So lots of time for that one still.
And if people just have general questions, like say they're listening, they're interested, just come down and if they're not sure or they want.
I always prefer a phone call. You can email too, but in person or a phone call is my preferred method of reaching out to people.
I like a text.
Yeah, texts are great too.
Then you can go from there.
Totally.
One of the things I was interested to do you think, is there anything more we want to talk about grants? I don't want to miss anything. I think that's it. Get interested, make it happen, have a conversation.
Reach out to us. I mean, we could tell you all the different amounts and categories and all these details that you're probably not going to remember. So the main thing to remember is reach out to us.
And maybe we should let you know we have some grant information sessions coming up.
Well, that's good.
There's one today at the CBT office from 2 till 3 p.m. And we will confirm that as we go. And then Colin and I are in a House It, if anyone is listening, on Friday. And we'll be at the Chutcham Hyatt Tikmis from 10 till noon and stopping by each of the schools. And then, Colin, you got a few more sessions next week?
Actually, tomorrow, Thursday, the 13th, I'll be in the UCC. So if you want to drop in, if you're a Yuki-based person listening in, you can come find me. I'll be hanging out at the UCC all afternoon.
And you'll be there to answer questions and exactly like this, information and guidance.
Exactly. Just hanging out and
support.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we've found oftentimes like sort of one-on-one grant support is the most effective way, and at these info sessions you can definitely count on having some direct. It's not you shouldn't expect to have like a big group of people all at once. Just come in and expect to have a nice chat with one of us.
All right.
And then next week we're going to be in Itatsu on the 19th, so Wednesday in the afternoon. And so we'll be
this is great. I love it. I love talking about this because it is a complex and important subject. Let's talk about living wage.
Ooh, okay. Let's get right. This is a lot of info. Sure.
Let's describe to people, if they're listening, they don't even know what that means. Let's just say, what is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you get to that number?
Okay. So living wage is a project that CBT has run for a number of years. I think going back to 2016 might have been the first year we did it. We're coming up on a decade of research, and it's part of a larger provincial project that follows kind of a standardized methodology to account for the cost of living in the region. So what we do is basically make a hypothetical budget that includes things like rent, food, transportation, etc., and try to make it as conservative as possible, but not struggling. You're not, a living wage means you're living. You're not, you're maybe not thriving. It'd be nice to have more money, but you certainly can get by. You've got a little bit of wiggle room. You're not under severe financial stress.
Right. Based upon local rents, cost of groceries, cost of gas, travel, transportation, all the things.
Exactly. And so what we do is we kind of verify all these local costs to the best of our ability. And then we kind of backwards calculate, well, what would that look like if you were earning an hourly wage at 35 hours a week full time? Major caveat, I know a lot of jobs in this economy aren't 35 hours a week year round full time, but it's kind of an approximation. And what we do is compare it between communities by following this standardized method, so we can really see how we stack up against other parts of the province.
Why 35 and not what I would, in my brain, I hear 40?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess to account for the fact that maybe some people wouldn't always have full-time work.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just, the nature of, I think you could have, it's a little bit, but another thing is that we need to be able to compare between communities.
Right.
So that 35 number is standardized throughout communities, so we can compare.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what have you come up with? And do you do this once a year as a calculation?
We try to do it every 2 years.
Okay.
But we did do it last year, and we're doing it again this year. We saw such a big, rapid run of inflation.
Right.
So we actually skipped a year 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then the increase that was during the fastest inflation. So that increase was a lot of sticker shock for a lot of people, I think. So right now the regional living wage is sitting at about $27.50 per hour. I think it's actually $27.40, but that's kind of a scary high number, I think, for a lot of employers maybe to see, or you might sort of say, how does this all compute? I'll note that that's based off of a family budget, so looking at supporting children and having some childcare costs.
And does that mean two adults would need to make that each?
Yeah.
Right? So 54, 80, whatever that might be.
But it also accounts for a lot of government benefits. So one of the things about the living wage is when it started in Vancouver 20 years ago, there were not nearly the same amount of government benefits to support families at the time. And families were really getting the squeeze, particularly low wage, sort of marginalized communities who were working the frontline service jobs. So that advocacy actually resulted in a lot of really good data and a lot of pressure on lawmakers to actually implement these subsidies that have since really helped families make ends meet in new ways. But what we have seen more recently, through the pandemic in particular, is that supports for individuals who are having to pay really high rents if you want to have an apartment without roommates, if you don't have a partner to sort of share costs with. It's actually individuals who are really not benefiting from government, benefit programs, and also having to eat a lot of the costs without sort of the economies of scale that we've seen through, that families can share.
Right. Can you extrapolate the cost of a single 20-year-old person working somewhere? Or do you is that the living wage? Or could you say, well, that's for families, but the living wage for for an employer, I'd like to know if I'm keeping up with that individual, because maybe I don't have a couple and I'm definitely not paying $27.40.
Sure, certainly, yeah. So this is exciting this year. After a lot of advocacy from groups like us, the provincial campaign has implemented some, pilot calculations for other household types. One household type is a single parent with one child. Right. The other household type is a single individual. So those are definitely pilot calculations right now. We basically just tweaked the framework for what we use for calculating. So for a solo, single parent, we only calculated the cost of owning and operating one used vehicle, and only, implementing the food costs and the various costs associated with only one child, but also only the benefits that you receive from the government for having one child. Right. And then, the flip side would be individual, no kids. Well, you don't get nearly the same number of government benefits, but but also the rent, I would say, for an individual is the most you would have to pay, because it's based on having your own apartment, not having a roommate.
So when you say pilot, do you have those numbers, or you're working on them?
No, we do.
Can
Technically,
I know them?
Yeah, the single individual without kids is actually higher than the single parent with one kid. Now, I'm sitting, in a room with Brooke, and she's looking
Single
at me.
mom
Yeah,
right here.
yeah. She's like, yeah, right, buddy. Like, so that's what there's a lot of complicated factors that these formulas can't actually properly come. So we're saying these numbers are very much taken with a grain of salt. And I think the end goal is to try to find a weighted average universal living wage that sort of brings together the different household types so we can have one that accurately reflects the broader region.
And when you look into, let's just say, using our the communities of Euclid and Tofino, is that a realistic wage compared to the jobs that are out there? And once again, this isn't you doing this. I'm not, there's no blame or anything like that. This is just information that we use to make sure everything's equitable, right? Or as much as possible. Because that seems like a high wage if you were, say, working at maybe a restaurant, unless you factor in tips or.
Mm-hmm. Well, that your question to me really highlights a big learning that I've had as the calculator of this, because when you go in without a lot of understanding or experience in the field, I was just assuming employers, employees. But there's a huge other, it's like a love triangle of cooperation and whatever that includes affordability measures that are sort of public and government related. So yes, that number is really high right now. I was really excited by the advent of the bus coming to the region, because if you can knock off the cost of owning and operating a car, in the case of the family, that's saving. The formula uses $6,000 a year, a bit more than that, to own and operate a used vehicle. So if you could knock that off the annual budget, the living wage number would actually be almost $2 less.
Right.
So wham, bam. Another one is affordable housing. One of the things that I like to share about the regional living wage is that compared to other communities over the last year, ours went up less than almost all of the other ones. So lots of other places are still seeing rampant increases in the cost of rent and food, which are the two biggest parts of the budget.
Right.
But here we were actually able to use a number for rent that was more or less the same as last year, which means that affordability measures here are working. Now, I know people would say, hey, that's not my experience. My rent's super expensive.
Yeah.
But what we did see is 80 plus units from Tofino Housing Corporation come online. And that's a pretty big splash in the rental pool. And so, we're able to say, well, our living wage would have been a lot higher if we didn't have those. So I've been talking a lot, but the main thing to take away is that it's not just government, or it's not just employers paying a living wage to employees. There's this whole other, working to make services and housing and transportation more affordable so you can actually get by.
When I worked in construction for a long time, and being on the island, you get everything shipped, your wood, your groceries, your food. So by living here, by the very nature of just being here, would you say it's 30% more expensive than being in Burnaby or somewhere like that? Vancouver Island itself?
I can't tell you percentages, but I can tell you for years we were the highest living wage in BC.
We were getting paid, or it should have been?
People weren't receiving that, but the cost of living was the highest.
The highest, yeah.
And recently we've been knocked off the honor, which is by Whistler. Yeah, Whistler just started calculating theirs, and it's higher, not surprisingly.
What about Port Alberni? Is it different from here than Port Alberni?
We've been working on Port Alberni to get a living wage calculation going there.
Right.
Certainly, it would be cheaper there because rent and food. However, Port Alberni has actually seen a super exacerbated, I think, increase in what the cost of living there, but they don't actually have the data really to demonstrate it. That's mainly to do with what's happened in real estate, and they've seen some of the most, because it went from being very cheap, and now they've had a really high increase. So people are getting the squeeze, and who's getting the squeeze? It's the people who don't have the money. But I think I could say for here, why we are so expensive, it's a little bit of a trifecta of things. So we've got really small housing inventory to begin with. We've got tourism and hospitality, which makes housing more expensive and less available. And we're rural and remote. So like you mentioned, shipping everything out here just costs more. So, compared to other communities, we've got all these factors that do create the price of living in paradise.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing it, because I think it's a good base of reference to help us all grow and figure out what we need to do to work together and make it realistic for people to come here and serve all the almost 1.2 million people that come here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
it's a big deal.
The main thing I want to stress, particularly for the business community, the employment sector, is that, I want to cultivate more of a living wage curious attitude than I must be paying the living wage, because it's complicated and it can change. Like if we do get a better bus system when BC Transit comes in, or if we do have more affordable housing come online in Yuki, all these things may change. And so everybody plays a part in advocating for this kind of thing.
Right.
So a business owner could say, oh, I can't possibly pay this. But what you could do is advocate for XYZ thing that would make life more affordable for your employees.
Yeah. I'm just going to make an example. Say the co-op. Maybe there's discounts on groceries. Like there's other ways to facilitate.
The free meal program at a lot of restaurants,
TUCG.
Yeah. All those things.
Yeah.
All those things make a difference.
Yeah.
And there are a few living wage employers in the community already. And congratulations for those that have signed on, because it's a big commitment to help your community survive in a healthy way.
All right.
Yeah.
I love it.
And on that note, a cool thing to think about is that some sectors have an easier time paying a living wage than others. So, for example, one of our living wage employers in the region is Saltwater Building Co.
Yeah.
Chris Bosman, very thoughtful, very community-connected guy. But he said, most of our skilled tradespeople were already kind of earning over the living wage anyways by being a ticketed tradesperson. So, they just had to bump up a few of their, sort of entry-level labor positions, and boom, they were a living wage employer. Whereas, Tokidoki, the food truck, they're Maddie Key, hats off to them, because they really worked super hard and made a lot of big, hard decisions to try to implement this. So it's really different depending on what industry it is.
Right. You deserve an award for doing this good work. See what I did there? Now the segue into, let's talk about the awards.
The education
The
awards?
education awards.
Yeah, it's that time of year. Yeah, it's February, so the grade 12s are starting to think about college and university next year, and we've got some scholarships available. They are open right now until April 3rd, and applications for each award are evaluated based on community involvement, participation in local culture initiatives, volunteer projects, sports and arts groups, personal reference letters, and proposed education plan. So make sure you have a good plan, as well as academic achievement. And so we're throughout the region. We want to help. We want to support.
Yeah.
We're working with all the schools, but please feel free to apply. So we have the Central Region New Chalmouth Education Award open right now, as well as the Clayoquot Sound Biosphere Region Education Award. As well, we are administering the Pacific Rim Foundation Dick Close Scholarship. So lots of opportunities for local youth.
And if someone's listening right now, which they shouldn't be because they're good students and they're in class, but their parents might be listening.
Yes.
What sort of things are available? Like, is it based upon academics? Is it based upon filling out the form? Is it based upon utilizing it for your future growth? Or what are some parameters, and what are the awards available?
It's based on a variety of parameters, not just academics. So keep that in mind. If you are community engaged and doing lots of volunteer work, and maybe academics isn't your strong suit, still apply. We're looking for exceptional youth that want and have a plan. Having a plan is a really, really key factor. So the education awards have recently increased with the cost of living. And so I think, where are we at, Colin? You have it pulled up there?
Yeah, it's $5,500 per year for up to 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. That's almost like I'd say, what is that, 50% scholarship?
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's definitely meant to support all sorts of different directions, trade certifications, university, other post-secondary education. It's really not prescriptive, and it's more like, if you can explain why this is a good idea for you and why it connects your community experience and all this stuff, then you're probably a pretty good candidate.
And what is the youngest person that could apply for this? 16? Or do you have to be...
You have to be graduating and
Graduate.
going to post-secondary
Oh,
school.
okay. I
and
see.
just something also to keep in mind, like all of the CBT grants and any awards given, it is chosen by community members that volunteer their time and thoughtfulness to choose the award. So it's not a staff sitting there questioning you off and ticking boxes. It's a really thoughtful process for all of our grants and awards. And we really want to thank our volunteers for making these tough decisions for us. As staff, it's pretty easy. We get to do the admin and the hard work, and they make the decisions.
Do you ever have a grant that goes unused, or do enough people apply where you get to administer them all?
I've been with the CBT for, I think I'm in my 13th year now, and we have not had a grant go unused.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
People are hearing, they're appreciating it. Are you getting feedback from somebody? For example, have you given this award? I know you have. Do you have feedback? Like, could we have a customer testimonial next time you come in with some young
100%.
person?
And we've actually reevaluated this education program within the last few years. Jason Sam is the lead on this, and prior to that, it was Faye Massar, and they really worked with the students. So yes, we have had deferrals often. For a student, that's very, very common. And then they work with you throughout your 4 years, or if you do a trade and it's 2 years, they'll work together with it.
Right.
But the whole evaluation went back and talked to students, and that's why it went up so much. It was previously 3,000.
Right.
So when Colin said that number, I was like, whoa, because I hadn't remembered exactly how high we had jumped, but that's a huge jump.
Yeah, and I'll say that's a direct result from the community-led, nature of CBT. I think if staff who are like managing budgets and stuff might have been, oh, that's a lot, like we're gonna have to take that from somewhere else. But we had these community members who were actively involved in post-secondary education right now.
Right.
They're like, listen, this is not, the need is greater than what you're offering. And so our community board actually said, we recommend more than what staff has actually suggested. And that's just a great example of how this is really by the community, for the community.
Are there any limits, for example, let's say Lothar Mick, just as an example of a young, genius, brilliant person, and then he goes to, say, Montreal or somewhere. Do you have to be in the province? Can you go anywhere? Can your vision be unlimited?
Yeah, it can, as long as it's some sort of post-secondary education program.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it has a certain level of accreditation. But I think it could be a music school, an art school, but it does have to be accredited.
Yeah, I mean, School of Life, you could maybe make a pretty cool grant application that just demonstrates getting out there and learning, but I don't know. I guess the committee needs some kind of criteria.
Yeah, School of Life is awesome. I just got excited because I had an excuse to play Lothar. I think... What else do we want to talk about? There's a lot brewing in the biosphere.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much our list.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of information. There are people scribbling stuff down. If you missed anything, let's tell people one more time, how can you get involved? How can you ask about this? How can you ask YouTube questions, or anybody?
Yeah, I think the simplest way is to go to the website, Clayoquot Biosphere Trust.org, and reach out. And also, we're always... interested in volunteers for our committees. So if you're interested in being one of the decision makers and feel like you're ready to give back, we're always interested in more volunteers to be on our committees. So reach out to us. We have a good staff directory page on the website, and really that's got our phone numbers, our emails, all the information is there.
Awesome. I'm very grateful you made time to come in. Colin Robinson, Brooke Wood.
We're grateful to spend the time with you, Cam.
The radio's fun. And look at this day, hey?
Glorious.
What a day. I hope you have a lovely day.